The desert night outside Fallujah, 2004. The air is thick with dust and the lingering scent of cordite. For the operators of a classified U.S. Special Missions unit, this was the heart of the storm. A target high value was cornered inside a nondescript building. The element of surprise was absolute, the plan flawless, but a weapon failed, not with a dramatic explosion, but with a quiet metallic click. A dead man's click. In the violent close quarters chaos that followed a storm of splintering wood, shattering concrete, and tracer fire, the failure repeated. The direct impingement gas system of the M4 carbine, the trusted heir to the M16, was choking. The fine abrasive sand of the Anbar province, combined with the carbon fouling from thousands of rounds fired in training and combat, had seized the mechanism. The bolt carrier group, starved of energy, failed to fully cycle. A malfunction. A clearing drill. Precious seconds lost in a fight where a single second is the difference between a mission accomplished and a body bag. This was not an isolated incident. Across the urban battle spaces of Iraq and the mountainous terrain of Afghanistan, a quiet crisis was brewing within the world's most elite fighting units. The very tool they had built their tactics around was revealing a critical vulnerability. The M4 and the M16 platform before it operated on a principle designed in the 1950s by Eugene Stoner, the direct impingement system. Here is how it works. When a round is fired, propellant gases are siphoned through a small gas tube directly above the barrel. These superheated carbon-fouled gases are funneled directly back into the weapon's upper receiver, where they expand against the bolt carrier group, forcing it backward to cycle the action. It is an elegant design, in theory lightweight and relatively simple. But in practice, for a special operator, it is a recipe for contamination. Those hot, dirty gases are dumped directly into the heart of the weapon. They coat the bolt, the carrier, the firing pin, and the interior of the receiver in a gritty cement-like paste of carbon and unburnt powder. The heat soaks into the metal, cooking the lubricant off, turning it to varnish and then to glue. In the pristine conditions of a testing range, it is manageable. In the sand-blown, dust-choked environments of the global war on terror, it was a death sentence. Reliability rates in some after-action reports plummeted to unacceptable levels. Operators spent more time cleaning with surgical precision than sleeping. And in a firefight, there is no time for surgery. The special operations community demanded more. They needed a rifle that was not just accurate but relentlessly, unforgivably reliable. A weapon that could endure the harshest environments on Earth and ask for more. A weapon that would not fail when a life hung in the balance. This demand did not fall on deaf ears. Across the Atlantic, in the small, industrious town of Oberndorf, am Neckar, Germany, a company with a legacy dating back to 1819 was already working on the solution. Heckler Koch, the engineers behind the legendary MP5 and G3, had a reputation for building firearms that were not just tools, but instruments of exquisite, over-engineered reliability. They watched the emerging reports from Iraq and Afghanistan. They saw a problem they were uniquely qualified to solve. Their approach was not to tweak the existing American system, but to re-engineer it from the ground up. They started with a simple, brutalist question. What if we removed the problem entirely? The answer lay not in the M16's lineage, but in that of another Cold War icon, the Soviet HK416. The Kalashnikov was renowned for its legendary durability. Its secret was a short-stroke piston system. Gases were tapped from the barrel to drive a separate piston rod, which in turn struck the bolt carrier, driving it backward. The gases, the filth, the heat, they were vented out of the system, not invited into it. The heart of the weapon remained clean, cool, and functional. Heckler and Koch, in their methodical German fashion, took this principle and refined it to a degree of precision the world had never seen. They would mate the ergonomic and accuracy advantages of the AR-15 platform with the brutal reliability of a piston system. The project, initially known internally as the HK416, was a direct response to the SOCOM solicitation for a more reliable carbine. It was not an evolution. It was a revolution in waiting, born from the bitter, sandy failures of a war thousands of miles away. The seeds of a legend were sown not on a drawing board, but in the life or death experiences of the men who needed it most. In the hallowed halls of Heckler and Koch's Oberndorf facility, the problem of the failing carbine was approached not as a mere engineering challenge, but as a philosophical imperative. For the Germans, reliability is not a feature. It is the foundation. The project, which would soon be designated the HK416, began with a core premise: to retain the familiar ergonomic profile of the M4 a platform operators had trained with for thousands of hours, while surgically replacing its flawed internal heart. The soul of this transformation was the short-stroke gas piston system. But this was no simple copy of the AK-47's design. It was a masterpiece of refinement. The system began with a uniquely designed gas block pinned to a cold hammer-forged barrel of the highest-grade chrome molybdenum steel. This process itself, an art form, created a barrel with unparalleled longevity and inherent accuracy. When a round was fired, propellant gases were siphoned off through a port in the barrel, but they traveled only a few centimeters before being harnessed. The animation on screen makes it clear. The high-pressure gases enter the gas block and immediately impinge upon a small, sturdy piston rod. This rod is driven backward a mere 19 millimeters, a short, violent, and efficient stroke. It strikes the front of the bolt carrier, transferring its kinetic energy like a hammer blow. This impact drives the entire bolt carrier group rearward, initiating the cycling process, extracting the spent casing, ejecting it, cocking the hammer, and then driven by the recoil spring returning forward to strip a new round from the magazine and chamber it. The critical difference is what happens next. In the direct impingement system, the fouled gases expand inside the receiver, coating everything. In the HK416 system, the gases have done their job the moment the piston strikes. The remaining pressure is vented forward out of the gas block away from the weapon's delicate internal components. The piston, under spring tension, returns to its forward position, ready for the next cycle. The bolt carrier group itself was radically redesigned. It was heavier, more robust, with multiple gas venting ports to manage any residual pressure that might find its way back. It was a sealed, self-cleaning ecosystem. The result was a mechanical symphony of brutal efficiency. The weapon's action ran cooler and infinitely cleaner. Where an M4's receiver would be blackened with carbon after a few hundred rounds, the 416's interior remained remarkably pristine. This meant operators could fire thousands of rounds between cleanings without any degradation in performance. In the dust-choked environments of Iraq and Afghanistan, this wasn't a convenience. It was a tactical paradigm shift, but Heckler and Koch did not stop at the piston. They engineered every point of potential failure. They developed a free-floating, four-sided Picatinny rail system, the HK416, that provided a rock-solid platform for optics, lasers, and lights, maintaining zero far more consistently than the standard M4's handguards. The stock was redesigned for better cheek weld and durability. The pistol grip was contoured for superior ergonomics. Even the trigger guard was oversized to accommodate gloved hands. The initial testing was ruthless. HK engineers subjected the prototype to a battery of trials designed to break it. They buried it in sand. They submerged it in water. They froze it in blocks of ice. In one infamous test, the mud test, the rifle was deliberately clogged with thick, heavy mud, every orifice packed shut. The test director would then fire it. The first shot would often be a muffled thump as the system cleared its own obstruction. The second shot would ring out clear and true. It was a level of reliability that seemed almost supernatural. To those accustomed to the finicky nature of the direct impingement system, the first units to receive these new rifles for field evaluation were naturally the most demanding customers in the world: the U.S. Army's Delta Force and the Navy's DevGru. Their initial assessments were filled with a palpable sense of revelation. The weapon was heavier, yes, a consequence of its robust piston system, but the trade-off was a level of confidence they had never before possessed. They could now operate for days in the worst conditions imaginable with the absolute certainty that when they pulled the trigger, the weapon would fire. This was the German solution. It wasn't just a new rifle. It was an insurance policy paid for in advanced steel and mechanical genius on the lives of the men who carried it into the dark. By late 2001, the war in Afghanistan had moved into some of the most unforgiving terrain on the planet. The cave complexes of Tora Bora, a labyrinth of natural and man-made fortifications carved into the granite peaks along the Pakistani border, became the focus of a global manhunt. It was here in this vertical world of thin air and freezing temperatures that the HK416, still in its developmental infancy, would receive its brutal real-world baptism. The environment itself was a relentless adversary. The fine talcum powder dust of the Afghan highlands was even more invasive than the sand of Iraq. It clogged air filters, seeped into actions, and mixed with lubricants to form a grinding paste. The extreme altitude affected the burn rate of propellants, which in turn could impact the cycling of gas-operated weapons. For the special operations units tasked with rooting out Al-Qaeda's most hardened fighters from these caves, a weapon malfunction wasn't an inconvenience. It was a potential catastrophe that could strand a man on a mountainside hundreds of feet from his team. It was into this crucible that a small number of prototype HK416s were deployed with Tier 1 units. The operators carrying them were among the first to trade their trusted M4s for the unproven German system. The initial impressions were telling. The familiar controls meant the learning curve was shallow, but the performance difference was anything but. The narrative builds through the accounts of these early users. In the dry, cold air, the cleaner running system of the 416 proved its worth instantly. Where M4s required constant meticulous cleaning to maintain function in the abrasive dust, the 416s kept running. Operators reported going through entire multi-day operations engaging in numerous firefights without a single weapons-related malfunction. The robust piston system shrugged off the conditions that crippled other firearms. The reliability was not just an improvement. It was a revelation that fundamentally altered their tactical behavior. The heavy cold hammer forged barrel also revealed a significant advantage in sustained firefights. Engagements in the mountains were often at longer ranges than in Iraq. The 416's barrel, more rigid and better able to manage heat, exhibited superior accuracy and consistency. When a sniper was not available, a skilled operator with a 416 equipped with a high magnification optic could deliver precise suppressing fire that pinned down enemies in distant cave mouths or along ridge lines. The weapon became known for its hammer-forged accuracy, a reputation built shot by shot in the thin cold air of the Hindu Kush. But the ultimate test came in the close-quarters darkness of the cave systems themselves. Clearing a cave is one of the most psychologically draining missions a soldier can undertake. The darkness is absolute, the acoustics are disorienting, and every shadow can conceal a threat. In these confines, the sound of a weapon's action cycling is deafening. The HK416, with its heavier bolt carrier group, had a distinct authoritative report, a sharp metallic clack-clack that was instantly recognizable. It was the sound of a system operating with violent, unstoppable purpose. More importantly, it was the sound of a weapon that would not fail when a fighter emerged from a side tunnel just feet away. The confidence this instilled in the operators was immeasurable. They could focus entirely on the lethal geometry of the cave, their night vision goggles painting the world in shades of green, without the subconscious fear of a malfunction. The HK416 was no longer just a tool. It had become an extension of the operator's will in a place where mechanical failure meant death. By the time the bitter fighting in Tora Bora subsided, the HK416 had earned its first vital stripes. It had been tested in the most demanding conditions imaginable and had not merely survived. It had excelled. The after-action reports filtering back to command and to Oberndorf were glowing. The rifle had proven its core thesis, that reliability above all else was the paramount virtue of a combat weapon. It was a lesson written in the dust of Tora Bora, and it paved the way for the weapon's most famous and most secretive chapter. Word travels fast in the tight-knit, clandestine world of special operations. The whispered reports from the mountains of Tora Bora and the streets of Fallujah created a ripple effect. The HK416 was no longer a German prototype. It was becoming a legend in the making, and legends attract those who operate at the very tip of the spear. The first formal large-scale adoption came from a nation with a deep understanding of warfare in harsh climates: Norway. The Norwegian armed forces, specifically their elite Marine Jägerkommandon and Army Jaeger units, were seeking a replacement for their aging AG-3 rifles, a robust but heavy and less versatile battle rifle. The HK416 was everything they needed. It was reliable in the freezing wet conditions of the Arctic, its piston system unaffected by the cold that could gum up direct impingement actions. The ergonomics allowed for modern accessory mounting, and its accuracy was superior. Norway's adoption sent a powerful message to the world. One of the most professional and environmentally tested militaries had vetted and chosen the 416 as its core infantry weapon. But the ultimate endorsement was happening in the shadows. In the United States, while the broader military remained committed to the M4 platform, the most secretive units made their own choices. The Naval Special Warfare Development Group, commonly known as DEV-GRU or SEAL, Team 6 began a widespread transition to the HK416. For the SEAL's a force that operates from sea to land to desert the weapon's resilience to sand and, crucially, its performance after being submerged in water were decisive factors. The piston system could be drained and would function immediately, while a direct impingement system often required clearing water from the gas tube to avoid a catastrophic failure. Other Tier 1 units followed suit. The Army's 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, the unit, integrated the 416 into their arsenal. For these operators, the rifle was often heavily customized shorter barrels for vehicle and close-quarters work, specialized triggers, and a dizzying array of optics and laser aiming devices. The HK416 became the stable, reliable foundation upon which they built their individual combat systems. It was the common thread in a web of specialized gear, the one piece of equipment upon which they could bet their lives unconditionally. The adoption spread globally like a silent virus of capability. France's Commandement des Opérations Spéciales, COS, including the legendary naval commandos, adopted it as the Bren. 416, Australia's Special Air Service Regiment. CSR and Special Operations Engineer Regiment, SOAR, integrated it. Germany's own Kommando Spezialkräfte, KSK, and GSG-9 counter-terrorism unit naturally made it their primary rifle. Each nation's elite conducted their own torturous trials, and each came to the same conclusion. In a world where failure is not an option, the HK416 was the closest thing to a guarantee. This period saw the birth of the rifle's iconic configurations. The 10.4-inch barreled CQB model became the hallmark of DevGru assaulters, a compact, powerful package, perfect for the confined spaces of shipboard operations or target houses. The 14.5-inch and 16.5-inch models became the marksman and patrol rifles for other units, offering greater velocity and range. The rifle was no longer a single weapon. It was a modular system, a platform tailored to the specific deadly needs of the world's most capable warriors. It had become the silent standard, the unspoken choice for those who had the privilege to choose. It was the weapon of the quiet professionals, a tool forged in German engineering and blooded in the world's darkest corners. Its reputation was now cemented not by marketing, but by the unwavering trust of the men who carried it into the abyss. As the global war on terror evolved, so did its battlefields. The open deserts and mountain ranges gave way to a different kind of warfare, one fought in the labyrinthine streets of densely packed cities in the dead of night against an enemy that used civilian populations as a shield. In this shadow war, where intelligence was gathered one room at a time, the demands on a soldier's weapon became even more exacting. The HK416 was no longer just a reliable rifle. It became the surgical instrument for the most delicate and dangerous operations. The defining characteristic of this era was the suppressed rifle. Firing a standard 5.56mm cartridge indoors without a suppressor is a disorienting, deafening experience, causing immediate temporary hearing loss and making communication impossible. A suppressor mitigates this, but it introduces a new problem: back pressure. On a direct impingement system, like the M4, attaching a suppressor forces even more superheated fouled gas back into the action. This dramatically increases the rate of fire, creates a violent, overgassed cycling action, and spews a cloud of gas and particulate matter back into the shooter's face, a phenomenon known as gas to the face. For an operator clearing a room, this meant being blinded at the most critical moment and dealing with a weapon that was beating itself to death. The HK416 with its piston system was inherently designed for this new reality. The piston acted as a mechanical barrier. The increased back pressure from the suppressor simply made the piston cycle with more authority. The fouling and gas were still vented forward away from the shooter's face and the weapon's internals. The rate of fire remained consistent and controllable. An operator could now engage targets in a confined space, maintain his night vision, communicate with his team, and not be exposed by the telltale muzzle flash or the debilitating concussion of an unsuppressed shot. This was a tactical advantage so profound it changed the very choreography of close-quarters battle. It was in these conditions that the 416 earned a more personal moniker among its users. It was referred to simply as the Hank, a derivative of its HK designation. It was a term of respect, of familiarity. To carry the Hank was to carry a tool that was predictable, trustworthy, and brutally effective when the stakes were at their highest. It was the difference between a chaotic, disorienting firefight and a controlled, violent execution of a plan. The weapon's reliability also proved crucial in the stack, the single-file line of operators that moves as one organism to clear a structure. In that stack, each man has a sector of responsibility. A malfunction from one man doesn't just endanger him, it breaks the rhythm of the entire team, creating a fatal bottleneck in a hallway or doorway. The knowledge that the man behind you and the man in front of you were carrying a system that would almost certainly not fail created a web of mutual confidence that was as vital as body armor. It was a silent trust built on German engineering and proven under fire 1,000 times over. This chapter in the weapons, life cemented its role not just as a superior fighting rifle, but as an enabler of a specific kind of modern warfare, the high-risk, high-precision direct-action raid. It was the tool that allowed the world's most skilled warriors to operate with a level of stealth speed and coordination that their adversaries could not comprehend. It was the shadow in the urban night, the sharp, precise crack of a suppressed shot that signaled the end of a target, and the unwavering mechanical certainty in the hands of the men who wielded it. The HK416 had become synonymous with the very essence of special operations. Violence of action tempered by absolute control. Every weapon has its moment in history, a point in time where its mechanical essence intersects with a world-altering event. For the HK416, that moment came on a clear night in May 2011 in a quiet Pakistani garrison town. It was here within the confines of a nondescript compound that the rifle would be tasked with a shot that would echo into history, becoming the most famous yet most secretive engagement of the modern era. The operation, codenamed Neptune Spear, was the culmination of a decade-long manhunt. The target, Osama bin Laden. The force, 24 hand-picked operators from the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. For this mission, there was no room for error, no tolerance for failure. Every piece of gear from the stealth helicopters to the boots on their feet was the best available. And in their hands, the primary assault rifle was the HK416. As the team fast-roped into the darkened compound, the world they entered was one of absolute uncertainty. Walls, doors, and darkness, each one a potential fatal funnel. The opening moments of the assault were a violent symphony of controlled chaos. Breaching charges, stun grenades, and the sharp suppressed reports of 5.66mm rounds. The HK416s performed as they were designed to, cycling relentlessly in the thick dust, choked air as the team cleared the ground floors room by room, engaging hostiles in close quarters. Then came the pivotal moment on the third floor. Intelligence suggested the target would be found there. The lead element, moving up a narrow, dark staircase, encountered a final, desperate line of defense. In the confined space, the reliability of their weapons was paramount. Any malfunction, any hesitation could derail the entire mission. The HK416s, running suppressed, allowed the operators to maintain auditory awareness and avoid the disorienting effects of unsuppressed gunfire in a concrete stairwell. While the full detailed account of those final moments remains classified, official reports and subsequent leaks have painted a picture of decisive, close-range action. It is understood that multiple rounds were fired by the assaulters, and the shots that killed Osama bin Laden were delivered with surgical precision. The weapon that delivered those rounds, according to multiple sources within the special operations community, was an HK416. In the aftermath, as the operators secured the compound and began their exfiltration, the significance of the moment settled upon them. They had succeeded. The mission was over. And in their hands, caked in the dust of Abbottabad and the residue of history, were the tools that had seen it through. The HK416 had not simply functioned. It had performed its duty at the most critical juncture imaginable. The public revelation of the operation sent shockwaves around the globe. And while the official details of the weaponry used were kept secret, the legend of the rifle that killed bin Laden began to leak out. It was an unplanned ultimate endorsement. The HK416 was now forever linked to one of the most significant special operations missions in history. It was no longer just a favorite of elite units. It was the rifle that had proven itself on a stage where the entire world was the audience. Its reputation was sealed not just in sand and mud, but in the pages of history. The shot in that dark room was the ultimate validation of a decade of engineering, a brutal final answer to the question of reliability that had been asked. In the sands of Fallujah years before, in the years that followed, the Abbottabad raid, the HK416's journey from a specialist's solution to a global icon was all but assured. Its provenance was now unimpeachable. It had been forged in the deserts of Iraq, proven in the mountains of Afghanistan, and sanctified in a Pakistani compound. The world now knew its name. The legacy of the rifle that outperformed the M4 was no longer a secret whispered in special operations armories. It was a chapter in the history of modern warfare. This legacy unfolded on two parallel paths. The first was its continued and expanding adoption by elite military and law enforcement units worldwide. The initial trickle became a flood. From the Turkish Maroon Berets to the Indonesian Kopassus, from the Singaporean Special Operations Force to the Canadian Joint Task Force 2, the HK416 became the benchmark. Its influence even sparked a new generation of rifle design, forcing competitors to finally abandon the direct impingement system. Weapons like the Sig Sauer MCX and the FN SCAR were direct responses to the paradigm the 416 had established. The piston war had been won, and Heckler and Koch had written the doctrine. But the second path was perhaps more surprising: its journey into the civilian and commercial consciousness. The mystique of the 416, its connection to the world's most secretive units, and its legendary reliability created an almost insatiable demand. Heckler and Koch and other manufacturers responded with civilian legal semi-automatic versions, like the MR223 in Europe and the MR556 in the United States. These rifles became the pinnacle of the modern sporting rifle market, coveted by firearms enthusiasts, competitive shooters, and collectors who wanted to own a piece of the legend. The 416 had transcended its military role to become a cultural icon, appearing in video games, films, and television shows as the definitive symbol of a modern special operations soldier. Yet for all its fame, the core truth of the HK416 remains rooted in the problem it was created to solve. It was and is an instrument of supreme reliability. It is the answer to the question asked by a desperate operator in a dusty Fallujah firefight, his M4 silent in his hands. It is the confidence felt by a SEAL fast roping into a pitch-black compound. It is the mechanical certainty in the heart of a mission where failure was not an option. The story of the HK416 is not a story of a perfect weapon. It is heavier, more expensive, and more complex than the rifle it sought to replace. But it is a story about the value of unwavering function over simple form. It is a testament to the principle that for the soldier on the ground, reliability is the highest form of accuracy, the purest form of performance. It is a lesson written in steel and carbon, that in the chaos of combat, the greatest luxury, the ultimate advantage is the absolute certainty that when you pull the trigger, your weapon will fire. Beyond the technical schematics, the ballistic tests, and the legendary missions lies the final and most human chapter. In the story of the HK416, it is a story not of the weapon itself, but of the relationship between the man and his tool. To understand this, one must step away from the battlefield and into the sanctuary of the armory, the dimly lit oil-scented workshop, where the rifles are born anew, and where the bond between warrior and weapon is forged. Meet Master Sergeant Evander. Holt retired after 25 years as an armorer for the unit. His hands, scarred and calloused, have built, repaired, and customized thousands of weapons. For him, a rifle is not a piece of issued gear. It is a soul, a personality. And the HK416, he will tell you, has a very distinct one. You learn the language of a weapon. The M4, it was talkative. It chattered. It told you when it was dirty, when it was stressed, when it needed a bath. The 416, it's quiet, stoic, it doesn't complain. It just works. That changes a man. You stop worrying about it. You start trusting it implicitly. That trust, it lets you focus on the 1,000 other things that can kill you. This trust was built in the silence of maintenance, where an operator might spend an hour or more meticulously scrubbing the carbon-welded bolt of an M4 after a mission. The 416 required a simple wipe-down, a patch through the barrel, a few drops of oil. It was a ritual of care, not a desperate act of salvage. This time saved was time spent sleeping, planning, or decompressing. The 416, in its efficient design, gave its user the gift of time and mental bandwidth. The armorer's art evolved with the rifle. They learned its nuances. How to time the gas system for specific barrel lengths and suppressor use, fine-tuning the weapon's heart for its specific mission. They bedded receivers into stocks for sub-MOA accuracy, transforming a combat rifle into a precision instrument. They became surgeons to the 416's robust frame, customizing it not out of necessity, but out of a pursuit of perfection. The platform was so fundamentally sound that it became a canvas for the armorer's highest art. And for the operator carrying it, the rifle became an extension of his own will. The weight, once considered a drawback, became a point of stability, a steady platform that soaked up recoil and settled quickly on target. The distinct sound of the piston cycling, that sharp metallic clack, clack, became the soundtrack of their profession. In the deafening silence after a breaching charge, that sound was the signal that the team was advancing, that the fight was moving forward. It was the sound of order in chaos. In the end, the legacy of the HK416 is not measured in contracts or kill counts. It is measured in the quiet confidence of the operator who checks his sector, his mind clear of the fear of a malfunction. It is measured in the shared, unspoken understanding in a stack of men about to enter the unknown, each one knowing the man beside him is armed with unyielding reliability. It proved that in an age of digital warfare and technological overmatch, the fundamental bond between a soldier and his primary weapon remains the bedrock of combat. The HK416 earned its place not on a spreadsheet, but in the hands of the men who stared into the dark and needed a tool that would not flinch. It is a testament to the idea that the greatest advantage in war is not always a superior force, but an unbreakable will backed by an unbreakable tool.